Welcome and good afternoon. My name is Charles Watson, and I am the program coordinator for African American Education Empowerment, also known as AME, here at Minneapolis College. And we want to welcome you to our keynote address in celebration of Black History Month. We are honored to have Dr. Lydell C. Lettsome as our distinguished presenter for the evening. Dr. Lettsome will be speaking to us under the title, America and Race, Why Are We Still Here? Without further ado, I'm going to share his bio and then turn the mic over to him. The Reverend Lydell C. Lettsome, MD, is a board-certified general surgeon with a background of study in Christian and medical ethics. He received his bachelor's degree in psychology and pre-medical sciences from Columbia University. From there, he earned his MD at Jefferson Medical College in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. A fellow of the American College Surgeons, Dr. Lettsome is also a member of Physicians for a National Health Plan and the American Society of Metabolic and Bariatric Surgeons. Dr. Lettsome is a practicing Christian who not only expresses his love of God and people through his surgical skill, but also through his service to the community and the world. He has traveled the world providing free medical and surgical care with various missionary groups. In addition, as a proud member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, he participates in several local community service endeavors. He is also the founder of the Van Burt Health Equity Project, a 501c3 nonprofit that works with churches to address disparities that Blacks face in healthcare. He has also served as a faith consult for the COVID-19 Prevention Network. In the midst of a demanding surgical career, he completed a Master of Divinity degree from Union Theological Seminary in New York City in 2010. He was ordained in April 2011 and strives to make full proof of his ministry through preaching, teaching, and writing. In addition to several articles on universal health care and health equity, Dr. Lettsome is the author of Stolen Money, Stolen Health, an award-winning primer on universal health care in America. Dr. Lettsome and his wife, the Reverend Raquel S. Lettsome, PhD, have two children, Tiffany and Luke. We are honored to have Dr. Lydell Lettsome in the virtual building with us, and we look forward to his remarks under the title, America and Race, Why Are We Still Here? Dr. Lettsome, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. Dr. Watson, thank you for that wonderful and warm introduction. Thank you all for the invitation and for signing in. Thank you for just being willing to participate in this conversation about something that most Americans are aware of, but very few, regardless of race, color, or creed, want to have any meaningful conversation about because it's a difficult topic to talk about. I'm gonna share my screen here and get started. Let me make sure I got it going right. So I don't know if I will, in this talk, be able to provide a solid answer for any of us to stand on why race still affects us the way it does. But I hope when it's said and done that we'll have different insights for all of us on how we think race not only affects us as a people, but how race affects us as individuals and what we can do about the ways race continues to affect us as individuals. I plan to spend about 35 minutes talking and some questions in there, and even a chance for a few of you to win some gift cards. But then afterwards, go into the rest of the time that we have to have a engaging conversation about where do we go from here versus what we are probably being told where we should go as a society. I hope to leave us with a chance to talk about some different options that we don't often see or hear on TV about where we can go as a society. So the first slide to see if this one will work since that didn't work. Someone will ask, well, why race? Why do you still want to talk about race in 2022? And part of it is because race still negatively affects us all. George Floyd, pretty much universally, the understanding is he died because of his race. That if he was of a different race, he might be in jail, but he wouldn't have died in the manner he did if he wasn't an African American. Kyle Rittenhouse gets caught up into it, killing another young white male there under the pretense of supporting the police. But what was the protest about with the police? The way police conducted themselves along the lines of race. So two lives change forever. 'Cause I'm not, even though he's acquitted, I don't think Kyle Rittenhouse is going to have the future he thinks he's going to have. And all of this is negatively impacting lives in ripples, their family members, the communities in which they live, all because of our inability to have meaningful engagement conversations about race. So how do I plan to go through this topic with us today? Well, first, going through how we started as a country and how we started as a society, more importantly. Then going into where are we now? Where are we headed? And where we can possibly go. Starting with how we started. For me, I will tell you I'm 51 years old today, about a month and a half away from being 52. And in my education and public school system in New York City, pretty much was told that how we started and the ethos of how America started was the, the Pilgrims and Plymouth Colony in 1620. But there's more to that. And first chance to win a $25 gift certificate is if someone could put in the chat, what was before Plymouth meeting? When were the first English settlers really here? So where and what year? And let's see, 1492, no. Anyone else wants to take a shot at it? 1619 is close, no. Well, I'm gonna move forward and see if someone else later, while I wait for one more chance. Anyone else? So the question is, when the English settlers, when were the first English settlers really here? And where? So what location and what year did they arrive? 1607 is it. Where? And this is nice and interesting to see in Virginia, and I'll move forward. But yes, some of this shows how the reality of what we've experienced as a people is not always as factual as we may think it is. Okay. And as much as we all really every year in November get all caught up into the story of the Pilgrims and Plymouth Meeting and New England, the fact from the English standpoint, America started in 1607 with the Jamestown colony. Now, it gets lost in the sauce sometimes because the Jamestown colony had a couple incidents, whereas they actually sort of just disappeared and folded in 1610 and then restarted later. But so they didn't really have the continuous run that the Plymouth colony had in the Massachusetts area, but they still were the earliest settlers, and for more than a couple reasons, really played into the success of the colonial experiment in America in more ways than the Puritans did. But I put that question there, and Dr. Watson, please get Jenny's information in email because she put it in first, that history is not static. And I think wherever we are in our life and what vocation we have, we really should go through life thinking that history, no matter who's reporting it to us, teaching it to us, it's not static. It can change because at the end of the day, history is someone's retelling of the past. So to make it more simpler, um, let's say for years, my mom has always said to me, your dad proposed to me at this restaurant and he did it this way and it was just an amazing experience. And all right, I've known that all my life. And 2 years ago my aunt says, well, I don't know, I was there and your dad actually did it this way, it was still very nice. And I'm sitting there going to say, my mom, I never knew that my aunt was there and she said daddy did it this way. Now, does either account actually change the fact that it's actual factual history? No, it just changes in terms of what was presented to me and what I was aware of. And sometimes in our society, we try to hold our history as if it's unchangeable, it's factual, and there's no one else who could question it. And that's not a safe way to view our history, no matter what lens you're coming from. And I use that to give the context, the introduction of where I plan to spend a good 10 to 15 minutes of this today with the 1619 project because I found it really interesting. And I'll confess, the original project, still haven't been able to get my hands on it. The book, I've halfway through it. But what I liked about just the whole project was the original question. What would it mean to reframe our understanding of US history by considering 1619 as its origin point? Now, so moving forward, I want us all to know, as I'm talking about 1619, I am not in any way, shape, or form, my agenda is not to talk about 1619 as if 1620 didn't exist, that 1620 doesn't have significance, or that 1607 doesn't have significance. What I do want to explore with is what the author, Hannah Nicole, came up with, the editor really, when she went to New York Times, is that this question of what happened in that year may hold a whole lot more significance for how America became a country than we are willing to give it credit for. Hannah Nicole Jones was a writer at the New York Times at the time. And she went to the editorial staff, a predominantly white group of people, and said, hey, in a year or two, it's going to be 1619. And for years, historically, that has been marked as 400 years from 1619. And for years, historically, that has been marked as the time of when the first slaves were brought into the Americas, that some Portuguese slavers captured them from another ship, put them onto this English ship, the White Lion, and about 30 or so people ended up in Jamestown who were captives from the African continent. And that began the opening and the intro idea of, hey, so far indentured servants and the Native Americans have been a completely failed task of productively growing crops and building things here. Maybe these African captives can help us actually build a functional colony here. So here's the placard that's still there commemorating it. And I want to just go through some things related to 1619 that I think will bear for our conversation. For one, as the author, Hannah Nicole Jones, pointed out, it happened before 1620. And I think that really is something that holds weight in the sense of what was the motivation? Well, there were people here before 1620, and the people here had a different agenda. It was independent of the Mayflower. So it wasn't as if they were working together. And then 1619 suggested capitalism and business and resources and not freedom of religion, speech, or anything else, is the root origin of the US. And that held meaning to me as I went through the beginning of that, because I have struggled as much as I love the freedom and democracy of what America represents. I often feel that America is at its core a capitalist country, and democracy is a form of government that we still experiment in. So knowing that in the beginning, before we ever had an idea to be a country, that in those early colonies, the idea was definitely how can we make money? And I also will go through the suggestion that 1619 and not 1620 is probably the reason why we didn't remain a colony of the British Empire until the 18th and 19th century, like most of the other colonies of the British Empire did. So I don't think I have to tell you that the 1619 project, just as it became famous, immediately became an eyesore, and several political groups, non-political and cultural, non-Black political and cultural leaders immediately tried to vilify it, decry it, denounce it. And this one, I always loved this presentation where Niles Nemeth and his group said the 1619 project was a racialist, and I was like, is racialist even a word? Wow. A racialist falsification of American history and world history. And I just was amazed. I was like, wow, talk about a desperate approach. I don't think you have to agree with 1619, but to say that it didn't exist and it has no meaning, this is just once again trying to completely whitewash, for lack of a better word, history. 1619 happened, and we as people and historians could argue all day long on its significance, but it did happen, and we know it started something. Like, this was known and accepted in academic history and even societal history long before Nicole Hannah Jones and her team decided to write the project. So it's not as if they went and pulled something out of thin air that people before them never considered. It was considered and accepted long before they posed the question of saying, all right, we knew this happened. Let's try to examine it as a different point of reference. And what I liked about David W. Blight, who's a white historian from Yale University, he said this before and he said it again in response to the critics of 1619. And the quote is, "Our nation's glorious remembrance is all but overwhelmed by even more glorious forgetting." That the United States of America, all of us, Black, white, Native American, whatever you are on the spectrum, we have a real problem with cherry picking what we want to remember about our past and what we want to remember about ourselves. So 1619 puts in this question in their writing that slavery wasn't just this act of grabbing people, but that slavery was a business. And it was a business that held significance to the American formation, that the United States started as a slaveholding republic because of slavery, that slavery is ideologically in our Constitution, and and in the constitutional conventions in 1789, they spent an inordinate amount of time talking about where would slaves fit into the fabric of the new country, that it took a constitutional amendment to abolish slavery. It wasn't as just as if some states said we're going to stop it, or other states said we won't do it, or the president's Emancipation Proclamation. Yeah, that was great, but really it was the amendment that abolished slavery. So it is sort of in the ethos of how our country started. 8 out of our 10 first presidents were slaveholders. And for another $25 gift certificate, who more might want to guess who owned the most of slaves of our first 10 presidents? Anyone put in the chat? Let me open this up and see. Very good guess, George Washington, but it's Jefferson. George Washington was close behind Jefferson, but Thomas Jefferson, the writer of the Declaration of Independence, owned more than 600 plus slaves. So Dr. Watson, please get Sharon Pierce's information. And George Washington owned close to 600 slaves himself. So all of these men that we appreciate and remember, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't appreciate and remember them. I'm saying that we should know that in the ethos of who they were and how they survived, and some of where they got their motivations to not want to pay taxes was based upon the money they were making as slaveholders. And that's at the core of the 1619 question, that slavery had a huge economic impact on our country, that you remove slavery, that we really did not have any financial standing. It was the driving engine of America's economy. At one point, and this is a book called Slavery's Capitalism. I got this anecdote that in the years up to the Civil War, approximately 1825 to 1865, the capital worth of the slaves in the nation superseded both the capital worth of the nation's railroad system and all of the northern factories combined. That's how much wealth and money the business of slavery brought to America, that they were generating more income than with all of the northern factories, which we tout as being the reason Lincoln won the war with the supply chain and the railroads. Another thing that we historically tout is how the Civil War was able to be won. But yet still, as impressive and as valuable as those two commodities were, they didn't equal the value of what the slaves were producing in the country. Tobacco, cotton, wheat, and sugar were everywhere. And they weren't just everywhere in the United States, they were everywhere in the Americas. Cotton, in American cotton, became the standard of cotton and textile for the entire world. And it still is today, believe it or not. So America's capitalism and slavery. I want us all to imagine for a moment, if what I just said may seem too far reaching to grasp. Just think for a moment, Cornelius Vanderbilt, one of the first big tycoons in America in terms of an industrialist tycoon who went from a ship builder and ship merchant to a railroad tycoon and the person who built the Grand Central Station in New York City. One of the first big self-made millionaires per se. Imagine Vanderbilt's ships and railroads without the cargo of slavery. Where would he have gotten the money? What would have been the ability for him to build railroads or build ships? What would he have been able to charge people to carry if it wasn't the cargo that was being made by the slaves in the slaveholding states? Imagine the J.P. Morgan banking empire without the revenues of the plantations. J.P. Morgan is one impressive American citizen. The things he did for the United States just blows away my mind. But it also must be known that he started off with wealth created by his father's banking. And that was very much tied into the economics of the international slave trade and the international commodity that slaves made, from the Caribbeans to Latin America, all the way up into the South American South. Andrew Jackson, his life and his presidency without the Battle of New Orleans, which was a battle to protect the port of New Orleans. Why did that port matter? Because that port was key to getting slave-made goods up and down the Mississippi, in through Canada, into the Gulf of Mexico, and into the interior of the United States. So without that port, if we'd have lost that battle, the United States economy would have been severely damaged, and his ability to hold down New Orleans made him an American hero, because everyone who was in business knew the value of what protecting that port meant, and it was his rise to the American presidency. Think for a moment the hope and the confidence of the American colonists, all those men we revere who gathered in Philadelphia to sign that Declaration of Independence. Where would that motivation have come from without the money and the productivity of the slaves? Most of us, we have been born and bred off of the idea that our country was founded by basically a bunch of gentlemen farmers who just wanted to be free. Yes, They wanted to be free. They definitely wanted to be free. They wanted to be free of paying taxes. And what taxes were they paying? The taxes on the goods they made through piracy, according to the British government, and the goods they made from their plantations, or the business of keeping the plantations going. So we have to start thinking differently about our country in terms of what the 1619 Project asked us. If we remove 1619 and those 30 or so captives do not come over, the Jamestown colonists do not see that they can control them, manipulate them, force them to be more productive year after year by both violence and threats. And then we instead just relied on indentured servants who had a contract that they would be free in 10 years or so, or the captive Native Americans who knew the land better than the colonists and also were fighting battles and disappearing into the countryside. Would there have been enough money and capital developed in the colonies? Would Europe have then decided to invest in Brazil or Latin America more so than North America? Because more slaves actually went to Brazil and Latin America than they went to the American South. However, the American South made more money. With 1620 and the Pilgrims, they survived. We know that. You can go spend the summer, Cape Cod, Martha's Vineyard, Boston. They survived. Their dream, their presence was a success. But the ethos of the reason that they were here, would that really been enough to push the revolution barely a century later? Would they have had the wealth and the security to say we don't need to depend on England without plantations from the South? Because it is written in several letters, several arguments that the plantation owners in the South constantly called out the Northern businessmen saying, hey, you keep calling us savages, you keep calling us uncultured because we have slaves, but all of the shoes in your stores are made by our slaves. All the shirts and the fabrics that you use are made by the cotton that our slaves produced. All the chocolate that you sweeten is made by the sugar our slaves produced. So they've made it really clear that the Northern economy was definitely intricately entwined into the Southern economy of slaves. So what would have been the need for the Boston Tea Party? Who would have been crying out, give me liberty or give me death or don't tread on me, if we didn't have that type of money being made in our country? And the money being made was the business of slavery. Now, I say all this in the context that 1776 still happened and is still very significant, I feel, for me, and should feel the same for every American. What I don't think is that significant is the 1776 project. It is a political response to the 1619 project. It has already been decried by most academic historians. The project is actually no longer going on, and they really never completed in terms of writing anything. But it's not, I want to be clear to the audience that I don't see a need other than political motivation for things that I don't feel are good for the country that we need to view 1619 and 1776 as an either or. They are not canceling out aspects of our history. They are both significant aspects of our history because 1619 helped give justification to 1776, but 1776 still gave a goal and a hope for the way we all live today. The amendments that happened after 1776 help us live the way we live today. So those ideals that we are all equal, that no taxation without representation, that you should be free to pursue your own destiny in a manner that you see fitting as long as it doesn't bring harm to those around you. Yes, we may not be living that out in the absolute black and white detail of it, but as a majority of the country, we strive for that. And I don't want to have anyone support an argument that say that if we talk about 1619, it means that we still aren't pursuing 1776. We are, and we can. But I think we also need to come into the realization of what 1776 pushes us to and what we teach and believe in isolation outside of 1619. One of those things is we preach that we are morally right, that our country is morally right in its creed and our foundation, how we operate, that we are just, that we are ethically just in how we operate, and that we have a duty to maintain and share our good culture with others. And we say this in a different way. You'll see it on flags, on trucks, God, country, duty, but it's linked to this thing that from our beginning, the way we started as a country with 1776, we started on morally right principles, that how we framed the country was ethically just to everyone involved, and that because we did something that no other country was doing, this democracy, that we have a cultural responsibility to not only maintain it here in America, but to maintain it around the world. That we still consider ourselves the defenders of freedom, not just on our soil, but across the entire world. So 1619, of course, gives us problems with that because it challenges our commitment to 1776. How can you say that how can you say 1776 is real when we have more people imprisoned than any other country in the world? It challenges to redefine what we remember of 1863, 1865, and even 1965. 1863, the thing of the proclamation of the slaves, that freeing them, as if it was like, all right, that nothing bad was happening. We just freed them, and it wasn't that horrible of a situation. It lends to the argument that 1865 was just a difference between the North and the South, that it had nothing to do with slavery. It was just about business. Well, the business that they were disputing was slavery. And even 1965, that 1619 started this two-tier society where one group was able to live in the manner that they felt comfortable in, and another group was constantly forced to live in fear of their lives in the margin. And that even though a war happened to stop the business of it, the slavery aspect of it, the ethos and the cultural aspect of it continued on in Jim Crow, and it took another law in 1965 to make that illegal. And we are still culturally fighting that question. 1619 supports the Mayflower because it then challenges us that, hey, we aren't here because of personal freedom. We're here because of capital pursuits, which is a significantly different way than what probably all of us have been taught to think about our beloved country. It questions why we are here. If we start thinking of 1619 being the original year where the drops of seeds were made towards towards the United States of America being formed as a country, it will force us to rethink our freedom and our sense of freedom, how we view enterprise, and how we view our society in terms of greed. And I put greed in because one of the most interesting things I've always read about the Boston Tea Party, that the tax that they flipped out over in historical context was a small tax, a tax that we've accepted as a people time and times over in different scenarios. But in that moment, it was the last straw, and they threw all the tea into the water, as we've been taught, and that was one of the lightning rods towards revolution. So 1619 was real, but so was 1620, and so was 1726. These years do not need to be written out or remembered as canceling out one another. They all contribute to one another. 1619 had an undeniable impact on the course of our country. And yes, it's going to challenge us on the way we remember our history, but we need to face that challenge because it is still defining us. We are still in many ways a two-tiered society where one group of the society is deemed as free, functional, and good, and the other group in the society is viewed as less than, not to be trusted, not to be fully free. So how are we doing? Picture 1,000 words. If any of you've been paying any measure of attention, you know that right now, we are not doing good. We're just not doing good as a country. We are ramping up towards war. Lots of talk of revolution, lots of talk of rebellion, lots of talk of the good old days. And when they say the good old days, as this flag bearer shows, the rebel yell that we need to take our country back, which is interesting because 1619 shows that the Africans were here in the beginning with everyone else. So take it back from whom? If you start at 1776, then you maybe have a better argument. But if you acknowledge that 1776 follows and is connected to 1619, then you have to really rethink your argument, don't you? You could 1620 doesn't give you that challenge, but 1619 definitely does. So, in the midst of our cries for rebellion and our frustration with who's actually in control of the country, we still have to contend with the fact that 1619 bears itself out in our country, in our justice system, in its prison industrial complex, our public schools, and the zip codes that define them, the makeup of our military, and particularly the enlisted troops, the race and income level of our essential workers, the location of our parks, our banks, our supermarkets, liquor stores, how redlining is still happening in very real ways. And while all of this is being lived out by one aspect of our society, we have another aspect of our society who, like that man who had the flag in their hand, feel that the country is no longer theirs, that they don't have control, that they're not safe and they're not secure and they need to fight for it, which to my mind is really hard to conceptualize when I look at the number of white NFL owners and head coaches. Got a 70% employee base, 99% owner leader base. You got how many white university presidents? You can go through entire football conferences. They're all white. The number of white Fortune 500 CEOs, the number of white television, radio, and newspaper owners. Believe it or not, this is a field where as many Black faces you see on TV, radio, and whatever else, it is still a 95% white ownership, white leadership, which made Bill Cosby's attempt to buy NBC so historically huge. Unfortunately, it never happened. And no, I'm not here to get into any conspiracy theories of why it didn't happen, but to know that as much as we may see Black people, Asian people, Latino people aren't controlling things. It is still only one aspect of our society. The number of white governors and senators, the number of white bank presidents. I was in a conference last year, summer and fall. There's barely 15 Black-owned banks in America, and none of them have that much capital. So it's this stuff of who owns what. The number of judges, and Article 3 judges are the federal judges. Those are the Supreme Court judges, the district court judges, the appellate judges. Same thing. Over the course of history, about 3,700 people have served, barely 400 or so African American. I mean, barely 100 and something African American. Like the number of white homeowners in America, the number of white people who receive federal contracts earmarked for minorities. This is something that we overlook time and time again, even though it's been a known fact for at least 2 decades. all of those Title IX, all of those affirmative action, all of those 1965 things about we must have fair representation, nearly 48% of that money goes to white women. So when I hear news media outlets or individuals express concern of control, I always wonder, what control are they losing? So we have to start asking ourselves, which year are we closer to? Are we closer to 1619 or 1776? Which year? Let me see, just move this. Sorry. Which year are we closer to? So for many of us, we really want to believe that 1619 is far behind us. This isn't just a white issue. This is an American issue. Most of us really don't want to deal with that. We'd love to just feel that, hey, we are getting closer to 1776 every year, and people need to stop complaining and get on board. But we have to be honest with ourselves and start looking at our culture and our society and the way we function and fashion. I see the question of what can we do. We're going to get into some of that. But 1776 is really the cultural norm, and it's not the token exception. Do we really believe that in our gut? We may say it, but do we really believe that? When we have the term diversity hires, we talk more about that than homogeneity hires. We are suing and fussing over affirmative action while completely ignoring our homogeneity culture. That courts are listening to people fuss and sue that they didn't get into a university and it was all based upon reverse discrimination, and they're suing in a state that is 16 or 19% Black. The school that they didn't get into is only 8% Black, but somehow they feel that 8% Black, even though it doesn't match the population of the state, it's too many of them, and that's why they couldn't get into the university. And the court hears the case as a legal argument in the 2000s, not in the 1960s. We have work to do. And we have to do this work fast, because right now, we've been pushed by many of our news and information outlets that we really are in a firm ideological civil war. From January 2020 to January 2021, there were attacks or armed rallies at the state capitals in Virginia, Michigan, Georgia, Idaho, Oregon, and Kentucky. That's 6 states in a year. Armed people showed up with rifles, threatening to go into the building because they felt that white people were not being treated fairly anymore in this country. So it's not even a question of feeling, it is an understanding that there is a real population that is starting to brandish weapons. So we have this issue that if we don't want to face it, I personally feel that we have become dangerously tolerant of intolerance, dangerously tolerant of book and art banning, censorship, and violent threats, and attacking elected officials and armed protests. I, 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 I don't remember hearing that armed protests was acceptable when I was 12 and 25 years old. But somehow now for certain groups it is. If we don't start objectively discussing realities and the actual impact of the legacies of these years, that some of this intolerance that we're witnessing is going to continue. Because we can't get to a point of discussion if we only want to talk about 1776 as if 1619, 1620, that the things that happened in the forming of our Constitution in 1789, if we just want to gloss over all of those and pretend that we just magically started with everyone having a fair shot, if we're going to accept women testifying, saying, hey, put me on the court because I'm an originalist, when an originalist would have never allowed her to be on the court, we're not headed in the right direction. I want to play this video to start getting into our conversations about a way forward. What can we do?
All right, get some water.
Sorry. Oh, jeez. Let me do it again. There you go.
All right, get some water. Hey, wait your turn, boy. You call me what, crack?
Quit it, jerks! Come on, you're all acting like a bunch of sissies! Quit it!
All right, man, listen. I'm Gary, you're Julius. Let's get some particulars and just get this over with, all right?
Particulars.
Yeah.
No matter what I tell you, you ain't gonna never know nothing about
Hey,
me.
man, listen. I ain't running any more of these 3 days, okay?
Well, what I got to say, you really don't want to hear, because honesty ain't too high up on your people priority list, right?
Honesty? You want honesty? All right, honestly, I think you're nothing. Nothing but a pure waste of God-given talent. You don't listen to nobody, man. Not even Doc or Boone. Shiver push on the line every time, man. You blow right past them. Push them, pull them, do something. You can't run over everybody in this league. And every time you do, you leave one of your teammates hanging out to dry. Me in particular.
Why should I give a hoot about you? Huh? Or anybody else out there? You want to talk about a waste, you the captain, right?
Right.
Captain's supposed to be the leader, right?
Right.
You got a job?
I have a
you
job.
been doing your job?
I've been doing my job.
Then why don't you tell your white buddies to block for Rev better? Because they have not blocked for him worth a plug nickel, and you know it. Nobody plays, yourself included. I'm supposed to wear myself out for the team? What team? No, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna look out for myself and I'm gonna get mine.
See, man, that's the worst attitude I ever heard.
Attitude reflect leadership, Captain.
Okay, what happened here? No, that's not what I want. All right. Okay, sorry. So I don't know how many of you've seen Remember the Titans. If you haven't, real briefly, it is in the backdrop of Alexandria, Virginia. It's based on a real story where a Black coach is sent to be the football coach for the first school in the district to be unsegregated. So here they are, they're in their fall football camp before they start the season. They are the first non-segregated team. The Blacks and the whites are first time being spent together, don't get along. And the coach, played by Denzel Washington, has assigned them that they all have to get to know each other on the team, that the Blacks have to start talking to the whites and they have to learn factual things about them. So this conversation between Jerry, who's the white character, and Julius, who's the Black character, is after they have been doing 3-a-days. And I don't know how many athletes are on here, but yeah, 3-a-days is a real part of being a competitive athlete, and that they are sick of it. But the coach is like, it's not going to stop until you guys start treating each other like human beings. And you see this conversation take place, which I think is so central to what is still happening in America, even though this conversation supposedly takes place in the late 1960s. Jerry is the captain. It's expected. He acknowledges that Julius has talent, but he is frustrated because Julius is out there doing his own thing. And they go into this back and forth, but Julius confronts Jerry's hypocrisy and fussing at him, that he's not behaving well. He makes it clear the white guys on the team aren't behaving well, but somehow you're magically not seeing that. He challenges his form of leadership, saying, I see no reason for my attitude to change based upon your attitude. If your attitude is, hey, this isn't a full team, there's only certain people who need to follow the rules, that makes no sense to me. A few days later, Jerry comes down hard on one of the white players for not behaving properly. And barely 2 plays later, without Jerry saying anything to him, Julius does his job, tackles a black running back for a loss. And this becomes the turning point in the movie for the team. A deep and true friendship develops between Jerry and Julius, and the whole character and direction of the team changes from that moment forward. But this thing that happens in this movie is, to me, is a sentiment of what we have to have start happening here in America. The people that control the cultural norms and standards of this country are going to have to start behaving like Jerry Bertier. And remember the Titans. We have become far more comfortable in fussing with people who have no control in the United States than talking to the people who actually have control. Our politicians spend a lot of time arguing about policies and people. And we go through all these sociological and psychological arguments about how people are behaving. All of our media outlets, whether it's Fox News or CNN, all of them do all these wonderful exposés on how poor people are mismanaging their money, how Black people are failing out of schools, how LGBTQ people are depressed. Go through all of these things, and we don't talk about what options, what choices, what pressures are these people facing. We talk about it as if this is happening in isolation, and it's not. Black people not taking care of themselves is also directly linked to the fact that Black people often don't have any good hospitals in their neighborhoods, don't have good insurance, and even when they do show up, it's treated as if their insurance is not good. And that is same for the LGBTQ community. Brown people being afraid, not wanting to show up to vote, not wanting to show up to participate in school systems because they're definitely afraid that someone is going to pull a Karen and call on them and say, hey, there were 17 Latino mothers here at this meeting. Not all of them could have been citizens. There are policies and structures in place that take away the needed safe spaces. And until we are willing to make safe spaces to deal with all of our biases and deal with all of our prejudices, and I mean all of us, because all of us have biases and prejudice, we're not going to go in a good direction. But we can't expect that to come from down up. When it comes from down up, it's going to come with burnings of buildings, people protesting in the street, and another young idealist like Kyle Rittenhouse showing up somewhere to kill an unarmed person. Is that really the way we want America to be? When we have a bunch of university presidents, we have a bunch of deans, we have a bunch of hospital CEOs, we have a bunch of leading pastors, we have a bunch of Chamber of Commerce leaders and a bunch of political party bosses who have the power and connections to hold meaningful conversations, to hold meaningful policies of accountability. That's where we have to start looking. If Jerry Bertier can grasp that as a 15-year-old white boy in Virginia, what I'm asking is not unreasonable of a 55-year-old white man who's on the board of an organization. Okay, played it again. Good. We have to look at how Jerry handled himself. He did not ignore Julius' complaint. He did not ignore the impact. Julius told him to his face, your people don't do well with honesty. That's a direct refrain to slavery and Jim Crow. And instead of saying, you know, I'm just going to worry about fixing Julius, and I'm going to focus on Julius being the problem, he realized that as captain, he was supporting and maintaining a policy that was not actually functional to the team. That it wasn't bringing out the best in the team. Even though he thought it wasn't. So Julius Jerry didn't fall back into the old notion, which I've heard in med school and in other places said to Black people, we freed you, what else do you want from us? Well, one, did you really free us if we can't live in certain neighborhoods? Did you really free us if we still yet can't attend certain schools? Did you really free us if the NFL is still facing a massive discrimination lawsuit based upon sham interviews? And as much as this one coach, Brian Flores, is getting put out there, I find it very interesting that several other Black coaches, some who are working or most who are no longer working in the NFL, immediately, unsolicited, came out and said, yeah, that happened to me. So there's something there. All of us on this line are people who are in pipelines to be people of power. And as we have power, when there is a need to change the system and we have the power to change it, we need to get the courage and guts of Jerry Bertier and change it. And that's not just for white people. That's for Black men. That's for Black women. That's for Latino men, Latino women, gay men, lesbian women. When you are in a room of power and everybody in the room looks like you, start being very uncomfortable with that. Far too many of us will go into a room of power and be more than happy and excited that 90% of the people in the room share the same background as us. That shouldn't be the norm. If we're looking for a good way forward, start paying attention to who else is in the room with you. Now, if it's a room for safety and healing, then homogeneity is needed. But when you're talking about a room that's exercising power and vision, diversity that's equal is needed. Because you can have a room that power, but the diversity is someone is there serving water and taking notes. No, the diversity needs to be that everyone who has a vote and is sitting at a table with sitting at the table with a comfortable chair is diverse. I'm almost done and we can get into some more details. 2 more slides. 52 years. As I said in the beginning of this presentation, I am almost 52 years old. And these gentlemen here have some historical significance for us and for me. I was born in 1970. It is the year 2022. 52 years before 1970 is 1918. So if you just reverse my lifetime as a middle-aged American and go back to 1918, in 1918, white women couldn't vote. In 1918, we were just finishing World War I, had no real expectation of World War II. In 1918, we were barely 5 years out of Ida B. Wells, barely 10 years out, of Ida B. Wells' famous campaign about lynching in the South. In 1918, we were just past the Birth of a Nation film. The Ku Klux Klan was at its height. And this slide has meaning and these years have meaning for us because so many of us, black, white, it doesn't matter. We really want to wrap ourselves in this security blanket that we are so far away from the negative horrors of our past. And we're not. We are way closer to that than we want to accept. The gentlemen in this picture are members of my fraternity, my chapter, no less, that I participate in. The two gentlemen in the center, both of them gave our fraternity handshake that we call the grip to Dr. King. Like, they shook hands with him as a member of Alpha Phi Alpha. And they are still alive. They eat with me. They are driving. They're walking and talking on their own. And I say that to say to us that the things Dr. King fought for are still real. When he was assassinated, he was one of the most hated men in America. And that just wasn't by white people. Emmett Till, killed in 1955. His cousins who played with him, they are still alive today. They're still alive. So the kids who was all outside the window down there watching the trial, a lot of them are still alive, white and black. The people who were well pleased with what happened to Dr. King, who took it the same way Malcolm X responded to John F. Kennedy's like, hey, the chickens came home to roost. Well, when King was assassinated, there was a significant portion of Americans who say, hey, you've been stirring up trouble. What else do you think was going to happen to you? Those people aren't dead. If these two gentlemen who were old enough, I mean, they were over 18 years old to be members of my fraternity, if they're still alive and eating breakfast with me, then the people who didn't like King, they're still alive and eating breakfast, and some of them could have been in that diner with us. So when I say we have work to do, I'm not saying it because I'm delusional. I'm saying it because it's still here. It's not some far off distant galaxy away. When we're talking about relations, race relations in America, we're not talking about Star Wars. We're talking about stuff that is still happening. The people who believed it, breathed it, are still alive. African Americans, I sort of said to white Americans and people in power, way for it. For African Americans, I think we have four things that we have to sort of keep in our headset as a way forward. One, our anger is justified. And no, I'm not saying go and burn down a building or cuss anybody out. No. Why I'm saying that the anger is justified is I don't think any young African American or middle-aged African American should try to force themselves into schizophrenia of feeling that I should be oh so happy here in America. We are still being oppressed. All the data shows it. No matter how many people roll their eyes, anytime anyone objectively looks at the numbers, we, our Latino brothers, and sisters, we are still being oppressed. Our humanity, our intelligence, our compassion, maturity, even our very morality is still questioned in public and professional spaces. So I don't say we're not past it. So we have some valid reasons to be upset. But I want to say the positive is, and what I like about 1619, is we are Americans because we have value. They went through all the effort, all the lost ships, all of the seasickness, all of the shackles, all of the money feeding us, the bloodshed of the Civil War. It happened because we had skills and we had productivity. It happened after slavery that the prison industrial complex was created because they knew that we had skills and productivity and they looked for a way to control it. We do make up a good force of the labor force. All this connotation that's pushed into our brains that African Americans don't do anything else other than collect welfare is a bunch of nonsense. We still are the majority of the labor force. We are the essential workers. We just aren't paid for our labor at the same rate as non-Black and brown workers. But we still carry this country. We need each other. Shamelessly look out for each other and help each other. There's a book out there called The Jewish Phenomenon, and it goes into how Jewish people raise their kids. And it's like 7 or 8 principles. It's a wonderful book. But one at the core of it is they instill into their kids, you have value. Who cares what country we were oppressed in? How many of us were? We got skills and talent. It's make it clear to them. You're connected to a larger group than yourself. So Bloods and Crips, whatever, you Black, you Jewish. So you can argue with them all you want over conservative or modern Judaism, but at the end of the day, you better remember you're a Jew. And I think we need to start instilling that into our children at every level and into our adults at every level. Be all hardy-toity, HBCU versus Ivy League, South versus North, West Coast versus East, whatever. That's all well and good, but at the end of the day, we still Black. We Black. The Montgomery boycott was a team Black effort. And I put this because it took more than a year. But people of all levels and aspects of that Black community worked together, because at the end of the day, it was like, no matter what, I'm Black first. And it's not about not participating in the larger aspect of America, but it's also realizing that we should not maintain the ethos of slavery, and that we don't trust each other, and that we don't help each other. God is real. And if you're an atheist, that's fine. I still encourage you to have faith. The universe favors justice. And you have to have faith that the labor you put in will not be in vain. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, John F. Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy, like these gentlemen had a different vision for America that none of them had a chance to see. But we are much further along as a country, and in LBJ himself, because of what they pushed for. And we cannot give up on it now just because we have a bunch of people trying to outscream us to go back into some good old days that weren't all that good. In summary, 1619 was real. And I think it's valuable for Americans of all races, creed, and color to go back and review that project and that question of, hey, what would it mean if our country really started in 1619, went through 1620, worked its way up to 1776 and continued? What other aspects of ourselves do we need to explore? Slavery financed our beginnings. Our patriots, our revolutionaries, our founding fathers and mothers, they got their money from slavery. The cultural norms and values that we still maintain in our country, they don't need to be completely thrown out, but they do need to be adjusted and changed. Black and brown people add real intrinsic value to the strength of our country. They are not charity cases. We are not charity cases. Without Black and brown people, the standard of living in America would immediately drop. If all of us just got up and went to the shores and flew out tomorrow, there'd be a lot of businesses and households that would crash. So we've got to, as a people, reject this notion that only one race significantly contributes to the health and well-being of this country. Thank you so much for your time. I hope I made sense, that it was a benefit to you. We're going to open up the floor for questions. If you want to support the work that my team and I do, we had a Van Burt Health Equity Project. One of the ways you can easily support it is go onto YouTube under our name. We have a channel there. We have about 7, 8 videos up. We be putting up 1 to 2 videos every month on things about healthcare and health equity. Subscribe, get your friends and family members to subscribe. That's if you want to make a donation, great. But I know I'm speaking to a bunch of students. The best thing you could do for us is subscribe, follow, learn some things, have conversation amongst yourself. If you want to learn more about us, you can also go to our website at www.vhep.org. Thank you so much. I'm going to stop sharing and we can talk some more.
Woo-hoo! I know that I'm speaking to a brother of Alpha Phi Alpha, so rather than say that was hot, I'll say he kept it ice cold. Thank you for those words, Dr. Lettsome. I certainly have an opening a question or two, but I know we've got a gathered audience, and I know our time is waning. So I want to open it up to the floor first to see if there's some questions or comments to address to Dr. Lettsome. Please just unmute yourself, share your thought, and then give the good doctor a chance to respond. And please, y'all, don't make me go first. All right, I guess I'll wade into the water. Give them a chance to get warmed up. First of all, again, Dr. Lettsome, thank you so much for your riveting presentation. I want to begin by saying I really liked the, let's call it the temporal frame of reference that you established, these relationships you made between 1619, 1620, and 1776, and how you lead by saying, in many ways, history is a matter of a perspective and what's at stake when we triangulate, because it's very clear that you're not trying to discount 1620 or 1776 as a feature of the historical lens, but what's at stake when we triangulate through those, dare I say, vertices. So I thought that was a very astute beginning. I have two questions. One, I like your reference to remembering the Titans, and you really use that that conversation between Jerry and Julius as a way to get to your move forward. That section of your presentation. So my first question, I'll ask them both and then give you a chance to respond. First question is, the thing that sort of, dare I say, triggers the exchange between them is the 3-a-days, right? Did they have some sort of shared struggle, common suffering, common experience, a discomfort that they want to see cease? And it's out of that this exchange happens. So I'm wondering, you use it as that exchange as an analogy. If you might comment on what do you think by analogy is the 3-a-days that Black folk and white folk are going through that can then prompt the exchange that you then see as moving us forward. You could meditate on that part of the analogy, or dare I say the allegory. Second question, in your summation, you talked about cultural norms and values need changing. I think that was your third point. I was wondering if you might comment on what norms and values in particular do you think need changing and why?
So I'll tackle the first question. Okay. And thank you so much, Dr. Watson, for picking that up, because I struggled with the timing and the time of the presentation and would that be too far off to put it in there? What got me, ironically, 12, 15 years ago into health equity was seeing how horrible American healthcare was compared to the rest of the world. Okay, so that thing of that stress is America as a whole before Donald Trump. Like, people in the room gotta, like, I'm not saying this to slight Donald Trump. Regardless of what I think of his presidency, it wasn't as if we were that well thought of in the way we conducted business as a country before him. We have tried to bubble wrap ourselves in this illusion or delusion that we're number one. But the only thing we're really number one is what I alluded to, is the amount of people we are imprisoning and dying. But we're not number one in longevity. We're not number one in average wealth of its citizen. We're not number one in producing PhDs that are natives. We're just not. All right. Like, so these things that matter, how educated your society is, what is the wealth of the individuals in the society, what is the longevity of living in people in your society, we're not number one in that. And it's bearing out in the sense of, even before COVID-19, depression being one of the biggest ailments in America. That Americans are sad and stressed, and that Americans are carrying some of the highest debt that we have ever carried as a society. And when you look at the things that would make the biggest differences in those things, that would make the biggest differences in wealth and family security, it's level of education, status of healthcare insurance, and your income level, minimum wage, right? Or just wage rates in general. What is the biggest problem around those things is race. To make universal income means Black people gonna get paid. To make universal healthcare means Black people are gonna have unprecedented healthcare access. To start paying off student loans means Black people, more so than any other racial group, are going to be free of debt that they never have been freed of. And as much as all of that is well and true, that is the myopic lens we are all forced to look at it. We discount the fact that how much of this will benefit white Americans. So let me give you this tidbit. In one of our YouTube videos, you go watch it, we talk about Obamacare. And we talk about how, even though the Republicans have done an amazing, I mean, they have done a masterclass job of not allowing that law to be ever fully implemented, still in the states that participated in the Medicaid expansion program of Obamacare, it increased the lifespan of white Americans. Now, it also increased the lifespan of Black Americans in those states significantly. But the funny thing is, why I say race is just this frustrating thing for us, white Americans still stayed ahead. But white Americans don't see it that way. They see it as, we are going to be paying and giving all this stuff to poor people who don't want to work. And we all know those are political, racial dog whistles for Black people. But when they're talking about poor people who don't want to work, they're not talking about white people. So this notion of that, and the same thing of making education free. Well, liberal arts education is expensive as hell, but amazingly enough, there's all of these programs free to get the union jobs of the engineering workers, the plumbing workers, the iron workers, all these things that are 90% white male. Somehow none of them cost as much as what it takes to get a liberal arts education. To become a fireman, a policeman, we're paying for all that, tax dollar free. And there's no one on Fox News doing any exposés saying, why are we paying for these plumbers to become plumbers? Why are we paying for these contractors to become licensed contractors? No one asked these questions. In my county, it's called BOCES, but all over the country, there's all these programs that are state and government subsidized, where magically enough, they're all overwhelmingly majority white male, where people are trained, brought into unionized programs, go and get $30 and $40 hour jobs with not a single cent of debt to pay for it. But when it comes to liberal arts education, which is majority brown people and females, all of a sudden that's ridiculous. That is unethical. That's not what we in America do. What are you talking about? Yes, we do, but we're only doing it for a certain group. So those are the ways where that thing of all these things that we need, but we don't look at it as we need. We look at it as it's going to benefit Black or brown people. Liberal arts, we need better teachers. We need more doctors. We need more nurses, right? We need that. We need artists. We need cinematography. Like we need those things. But somehow because so many Black people have done it, we don't want to pay for that. So that's where the pressure is. If our media and people were more honest in saying what the overall impact of these social programs were about, I think the feeling towards it would change in America. But so much of our social programs are defined and advertised as if they're going to help Black people. And yes, they do help Black people. But here's the data that's never mentioned on MSNBC or Fox News, is that they always, almost always help white people even more than they help Black and Latino people. And white people are suffering because they are programmed to vote against their own best interests. Sorry if that was too raw, but it's real. It's
Well, I have
real.
a question. Mine's is more like the teaching, because I know I was born in the 90s, 1990, and I feel like my education was like not even cared for. And now that I'm in college, I'm having a hard time navigating what any of it, because I never was taught properly. No one cared to like really even like, like far as like everything, social, everything that had to do with school that doesn't really like it didn't matter to me. You know what I mean? Like I didn't have the right teaching. And now I want to be a teacher and I want to actually reform the way that we're teaching our children, especially in our communities. And how do we get to the disparities to like kind of offset some of it? Because I know even now with my own children, I feel like they're not being taught properly and they are being taught things that is not, it's not reality. It's not the reality of our community, and that's not fair. And what would you suggest, like far as like trying to navigate these systems to like get an education and also have like tutoring or anything that helps the Black community better? Does that make sense?
Let me see if I understand. If I understand your question, if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying that we have a broken education system, and particularly where there's a lot of Black and brown people. But you're beyond that, you're looking for suggestions on how to address that. Is
And
that what I'm
also
hearing?
like funding, like how do we even get to that point where funding even like how do you get funded for programs and things like that?
Um, so one, just which programs are you referring to, I guess?
Schooling, because I think
So if I got it, if it's just how can schools be funded better as a whole?
yes, and getting better teachers in.
Um, it comes down to how we want to really change our school system as a whole. And I'll try to answer this succinctly. Public education was never the original plan in America. It came through the social, not social justice. Um, Lord, I'm blanking on it, but it was a social Christian movement in the 1800s to really address just the ridiculous disparities of the Gilded Age. And it was like, we got to stop it where kids are working in factories at 5 and 8 years old and stuff like that. We got to put in the funding for schooling. It evolved from that into, all right, we're going to allocate the funds based upon zip codes. And after that, that has pretty much been the doomsday of the American public education system. The 1965 Civil Rights Act and the Brown v. Board of Education Supreme Court, both of those things tried to address that in the sense of, hey, funds need to go properly to school systems regardless of where they are. That has never happened. In the South, they circumvented it by creating a bunch of white Christian schools. So the majority of the Christian school system in America is based upon a white conservative response to the 1965 Civil Rights Act to desegregate schools and make education equal. All of a sudden, white people who never showed up in church for any Sunday out of the year felt their kids needed to have a Christian education because that loophole of it being a private school meant that they did not have to follow the rules of the government. So we have two problems that it would take awareness and demanding of politicians. Our school systems are by and large guided by our zip codes. And then you can't go to the best school in your area. You follow me? So they will magically have all of the resources in a predominantly white zip code. But if you say to yourself, all right, that's only 2 miles away, I'm gonna put my kid in an Uber every day because that's worth it for him or her to get that education, you'll go to jail. So we don't allocate the money equally across the zip codes. That's the problem, to the core of your question. We don't allocate the money equally across the zip codes, and then we will literally imprison people who try to jump that system. And so far, the most recent answer to that has been create charter schools. Although they have had success, I am wary of and leery of charter schools because charter schools is linked to the privatization movement. And history has shown anytime you privatize something, it's only a matter of time before it doesn't help poor people. So right now it's all well and good, but it's a privatization which pushes back against the sense of publicly, we don't want to be responsible for anything that will positively affect Black and brown people. And we need to, at all levels, call it out for what it is. That's what it is. Better distribution of the money across the zip codes and acknowledging that there's a resistance to pay the money that would probably educate Black and brown people. And to your question before, Dr. Watson, this is some of our cultural norms. All of us in America, we really have accepted that somehow the outcomes of Black people, brown people, Native Americans is their fault. And all of us want to turn a blind eye. And I mean that meaning the majority, that we turn a blind eye to sometimes some very obvious causes. That it's not that. The CDC is in its second decade of talking about the social determinants of health. But you can go to a med school and ask a kid who's AOA, meaning honor roll in the class, what is social determinants of health? And it'll be a coin toss if that kid knows what it is. Why? When we know that those those are the most common things that are accepted. Some people have 6 and 12, but those 5 parameters actually will affect someone's lifespan more so than the healthcare they get. But how are we tolerating a med school system that is routinely graduating tons and tons of doctors every year who have no clue what that is? We have to demand more. Someone said we all do better when we all do better. Yeah, that's also raising the expectations and complaining directly, not vaguely. Race is such a problem in America that they have made us afraid to talk about it. So then we get away with not addressing it. We'll talk about everything other than the elephant in the room.
Amy, please, I see your hand raised. Please share your thought, your question, your remark.
Yes, Thank you so much, Dr. Lettsome. I really appreciated your talk a lot. And I just have a quick question. I'm curious, you talked a lot about systems change. And I'm curious if you can comment on a lot of times the forces of white supremacy pit targeted groups together or pit targeted groups against each other. And I think that's a big problem when so many of us are working on systems change. And I'm just curious, in your experience, if you have any comments to share about that.
Wonderful question, Amy. Thank you. So when I was saying for the way forward for African Americans, it was really linked directly to that concern that we will get so caught up into, I don't know, your niche is not my niche. And it's like, who on earth told you that? It's like, really? Like we're all suffering here. And you don't want to have this conversation because you are a conservative Christian. And I'm just saying, like, to give an example, and the person at the opposite side of the table is opening and affirming of supportive of LGBTQ people. Are you serious? That is the hill you want to die on? Like, we're literally being shot in the streets, but you don't want to sign this paper because this guy, you may be gay. You don't know. All you know is he supports gay rights, and you don't want your name and his name to be in the same resolution. That's where, and it's people in the room calling that out for what it is. That's where it's like, when I go to the next point, was saying you are getting trained. I know it's hard to, particularly as a student, to imagine it, but you are being trained to be in rooms of power. And far too often we are silent. And I'm not saying don't be savvy about it. You got to have some tact. It's a Game of Thrones situation. Be really clear about that. But you got to have your strategy of how do I make sure the best interest of the group and not the niche things take precedent. And sometimes it's just muttering to yourself. It's like, I think there are bigger issues here. And someone hearing you say that, like, what do you know? I'm not saying anyone's wrong. I just think there's some bigger issues here we need to consider. And just putting that out there in the room and let them marinate. To an example of what I lived, I got invited to participate in a company that's planning to do some kind of big clinical what to do. And I was, okay, enamored. Wow, like, all right, these guys are some players and rich and connected. And wow, they want my young little Negro behind to be here. And this is a good opportunity. And I look around, all right, it's about my third meeting. Everybody here in this room, peace, standing up. All right. This is not how I want us to be. And I had to think for it for a while. And I waited, and they came and said, oh, we want to take some photos. And I saw it as my opportunity. And I said, all right, well, I don't know. And they were like, well, I say, the optics of this is just a bunch of dudes. Is that who we really want to be? We're saying we're looking to help all people, and there's only a bunch of dudes here. So it took 5 weeks, but I got my opportunity and I seized it. And thankfully now, the president was speaking to me this weekend, and it's now on the agenda. Search, we need some females in here. That's how you, it's not like trying to make people feel bad, or how you, like, we all got blind spots, myself included, but that's how we make each other stronger, not being afraid to talk about the blind spots.
Thank you, Dr. Lettsome. I want to be respectful of your time and the time of those that have seen fit to hang out during our Q&A period. Just a real quick shout out. Please be on the lookout for our upcoming events. I want to underscore both the 23rd of February, when we will be bringing Dr. Raymond Wise and the African American Choral Ensemble of Indiana University to our virtual campus for a conversation and celebration of song. Be on the lookout for that post. Also, on February 24th, in partnership with American Indian Success, we will have an afternoon of storytelling from 4 to 5 p.m. The Black Storytellers Alliance from 5 to 6 p.m. Our winter storytelling event sponsored by American Indian Success on the 24th of February. And then if you're on campus there at Minneapolis College, here at Minneapolis College, our virtual campus, but if you're actually on campus from 6 to 8 p.m., we'll have a community mic event. So storytelling, the narrative of our experience on the 24th, and a conversation and celebration of song, dare I say, the history of Black music here in America with Dr. Raymond Wise on February 23rd. Be on the outlook if you don't already have those dates circled for the Zoom links. I want to shout out Dr. Lettsome again, and thank you for sharing your gifts with us. We look forward to bringing you back to campus again very soon. My name is Charles Watson, Program Coordinator for AME, African American Education Empowerment. We want to thank you for participating in our keynote address celebrating Black History Month under the title Race and America, Why Are We Still Here? Dr. Lettsome did much with that title this evening. So thank you for your time, and we look forward to seeing you all again soon. Have a good evening.
Good evening.